Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on The Father Show. I'm your host, Mike Thompson, and today we have another fantastic show. But before we get there, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel at The Father Show with Mike Thompson, go to our YouTube channel. So hit that subscription button, and while you're there, hit that notification bell so that way you'll always be notified when we have a show. And if you are looking for resources, you can go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com, click on resources, and there you will find our guests. There you will find resources there that can help you in any situation that you may be in. Those information is there for you, and we want you to know that we don't use any cookies. So men, we want you to go get the resources that you need, make the phone call that you need to make, and get you or your family the help that they may need or the assistance that you may need. And we'll never know you were there. All we want is you to do is make sure you have all the information that you need so that you can be the best version of yourself. And that is what we're striving for, and that's what we're looking for. So today on our show, we have Janet Price, and she is the CEO of JP Coaching and Consulting Incorporated, and she's also the founder of Divorce and Thriving Beyond. Janet is a certified divorce specialist, conscious co-parenting coach, and a life purpose coach who empowers loving parents with the skills and the tools they need to keep their children out of the divorce and after, so that their kids may love and be loved by both parents. Now, as a child product of divorce, Janet was caught in the middle well into her adult years as a co-parent involved in a high conflict relationship, and she understands all too well what happens to the children when they are caught in the middle. And after more than 6 years of reflection and healing, Janet became conscious of the trauma she had experienced as a child being caught in the middle and parenting high conflict co-parenting relationship, and how she had unconsciously replayed this same story in her own co-parenting relationship. So without any further ado, because I really want to get into this because I think it's a great topic that we all that have gone through a divorce, been through a divorce, maybe get ready to go through a divorce. We really need to understand just how important it is that we keep our kids out of it and how we can help them navigate through this divorce themselves and don't take on so much of it themselves and don't have the trauma that they can grow up with and reflect in their own lives. So without further ado, let's welcome Janet Price of JP Counseling and Consulting. Janet, how you doing today?
Mike, thank you for such a wonderful welcome and introduction. I'm doing great. How are you?
I really can't complain. I'm very blessed, honestly.
Good, good, good.
Yeah. Now I want to dive into something. Now, you mentioned in your bio that you came from, as a product of divorce, of a high conflict divorce and parents and co-parenting. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your story?
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually my why for what I'm doing now. So my parents were in sixth grade, or I was in sixth grade when my parents divorced.
Okay.
And um, But uh, I thought I understood the divorce very clearly. I thought it was just no problem. And when I graduated at 17, I went on to college, and I'm a type A sort of personality, and I started doing everything in college, um, and had a direction for my life and was very motivated for what my future was going to look like. Um, However, the interesting part is the moment I left my hometown, I never went back. And so years later, what I came to realize in after I personally had divorced and I had my high conflict relationship with my co-parent go from bad to worse to very worse to awful. Um, and I took some reflection. I realized that really my childhood experience with my parents, why I thought I was okay, I was absolutely not okay.
Mm.
I had been a strong enough personality as a child that I said no to my parents when they said things that put me in the middle. But I had one parent in particular that was really, really, really seeking to have me hate my other parent. And it was not intentional. It was because that parent stayed stuck in the victim mindset and wanted
Mm-hmm.
everybody around them to wallow in their victimhood. So brought everybody in. So what happened with that, because I was strong enough as a person, strong willed, I just rejected it, which is why consciously I felt like I was just okay. Um, but subconsciously it was in me. And so when I met my first husband, he felt very comfortable to me. And we had, a wonderful courtship and dating life, and in our marriage before children, we had a wonderful time. And then once we had children, I went from a career mom to a stay-at-home mom, and that's when our communication struggles really played out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we ended up divorcing. And those communication struggles didn't get better, they got worse. Um, and that's when I started to see actually the individual that I had chosen was the reason he felt so comfortable to me is because he had so much of that parent in him
Mm.
that I was not consciously aware. So he felt natural to me, and I had gravitated to him to heal those wounds that I was not conscious about. And so this all didn't happen with me until in my high conflict or increasingly high conflict co-parenting battles, and I didn't see them as battles, but in the end, in the span of over a 10-year time period, we were in court a total of 5 times, and Department of Child Services was called on me. And I think it's very important here, Mike, to talk because we're on the Father's Show. And I know that on the Father's Show, men feel that women and mothers tend to use the system. And I'm here to say that the system is going to be used by any personality type. It is not a gender issue at all. And
Yeah.
so, in my case, it's a personality trait. It is not a gender. And so Department of Child Services in California is what they call the family or child protective services. um, 5 times. It started when my children were younger, so it was a safety concern that we're all false always.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a play to gain 100% custody. So 5 times and by the way, this was not a money issue. There was no alimony and there was no child support ever going back and forth between houses. So this had nothing to do with financial pull one way or another. This was strictly about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the third time, I had asked the courts as an ancillary to please involve a therapist that was specifically for the children to help the children
Mm-hmm.
deal with staying out of the middle. And that therapist was with the children for a total of 2 years. At the end of the 2 years in that time period, there was then an allegation that I was sexually abusing both of my sons,
Wow.
who at this point were now 11 and 13. And it went first to the therapist. And when the therapist, a mandated reporter, indicated that there was no sexual abuse occurring.
Hmm.
Then it went to the courts. And so at the end, that was the last time we were in court under false allegations of sexually abusing both my children. And that court uh, case went for a 3-year time period without the facts of the case ever being heard. And in the end, I chose for the mental health well-being of my sons to settle a case. During that time period, over the 3 years, the judge had, without hearing facts, had placed a no contact order on me. So
Mm.
at the age of 13 for my older one and 11 for my younger one, I had a no contact order placed on me with my children that went from they were with me 50% of the time to no percent of the
Hmm.
time, and that lasted for the entire 3 years of until I settled. And then it took a year and a half, and then my older son started reaching out to me. So fast forward, my sons are 20 and 18. I have their one's almost in college and one is a sophomore in college. I have a really beautiful relationship with my son, the older one, and my younger one is starting to have a communication with me
Hmm.
now. And that is because of this foundation that we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
This is about how I always showed up for with him, with both of them in all of this. It's how I help them navigate difficult situations. So even in the end, when it was out of my control, the courts made decisions. Um, that bond was actually never broken, and I had to just have it be there so that
Hmm.
I could show them the path to bring it back.
And I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned something that is not, the court is not gender bias. And a lot of men, we do think it's gender bias. But I think the reason why we do, and I agree with you because I have seen it on both sides. I think is we feel this gender bias is because generally, not always, but generally the woman is the one that is going to file false claims on the other because, man, let's put it this way. Sometimes men are the ones that cause the divorce to happen because whether they cheated or whether they fell out of love or something, but they hurt the woman. And with that hurt, she has, the anger and she wants to get back at the man in some way, shape, or form. And they will make up allegation. I've had it happen to me, so I know what this part I'm talking about. But I've also had it happen to women that I know, where the man has went in there and said, "Poor me," and that woman was like, whatever. I just wanted a divorce. I just get me out of this. So it seems like whichever parent is the one that's hurt is the one that is going to cause the conflict. It's not always the best interest of the child, like you mentioned, you sexually abusing your child. That was something that was brought up by your former husband so that he could get control and hurt you, is what I'm expecting. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay.
there are really. And so let me take you back, and this is part of the work that I do with one or the other parent. So I am a divorce and co-parenting coach, but I don't work with the couples together. I work with, I can work with either, but I'll work with one parent at a time. And that is because it's very individually driven.
Mm-hmm.
So, how I told you in my story that what I wasn't conscious to was that I had subconsciously gravitated to a personality
Mm-hmm.
type.
Right.
Had I been a man,
Right.
I would have subconsciously gravitated to a woman
Mm-hmm.
who had an overall personality type that liked sitting in the space of victimhood,
Mm-hmm.
that liked that celebrated, that didn't have the skills and tools to know, life happens every day. I mean, COVID happened to all of us. I mean, life happens, and how you show up and handle the things that happen to you is how successful and how happy you are in navigating your life in the future.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, when we talk about the gender issue, it's really, um I see this more as this type of co-parenting where there's high conflict, or it continues to escalate, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't go down after, a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it just keeps going. That is because you're dealing with an unhealthy individual
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't know how to walk through their emotions and heal and look to their future. And that's
Right.
really where this comes from.
Yeah. And you're right. And you mentioned something that you were going off of what you've seen and what you've learned. And it's one thing that we talk about on this show is the fact that we are teaching our kids how we should act, and they are modeling that. Even subconsciously they model that, and they also pick, generally men pick women like their mothers or girls pick men like their father, generally, if they knew their father, which is a problem in
Right,
itself. But
right.
we are taught, and we do certain things subconsciously because that's how we've seen it done. That's how we've seen somebody respond. And so we do it without even realizing it sometimes.
You're so That's so fascinating, Mike, because I have a private Facebook group, and I bring on individuals to have discussions on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I had a child therapist come on to talk about this, and she brought to me something that I didn't realize, which was, she actually said there's the facts are 95% of what how children learn and how they move into adulthood is based on our behaviors, has nothing to do with our words.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to reinforce that she actually said kids are like sponges.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best thing to do for our children when we're divorcing is to show them how to go through and process in a healthy manner, and how to, it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to feel lost. Divorce is a grief. It's the same cycle as when you lose a loved one, yet the person's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets a little bit messed up, but you still have to go through all those same emotions. So modeling to your children that you are experiencing within the bounds of healthy experience, and then showing how you move beyond that,
Yeah.
is what she said will teach your children in a divorcing process more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're anxious or nervous about, we're divorcing, what's going to happen to the kids? Don't worry. What's going to happen to you? How are you going to handle it? How are you going to show up? How are you going to find a happy space again? How will you find a thriving life? Is much more important for your children than anything else.
Yeah. And you mentioned something too that I think is very important, that as a child or as a parent, really, we should never tell our child about the other parent in the sense of he or she is a bum, or he or she is a drug addict, or he or she is this and that and the other, because kids are in tune and they have a real good keen sense to be able to figure out what their parent is and who their parent is. And they have their own ideas and their own opinion of who their parent is. So you really don't even have to
Yes.
say anything.
Yes, so I'd love to talk about that. So, my mission really is working with parents, individuals, to help them heal through this process
Mm-hmm.
so that their children are free to love and be loved by both parents. If you go down and dig down, it's not just saying those words. There's lots of ways that children feel that it's not okay to love one or the other parent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and it's by what we do and what we say, right? And so it can be as direct and overt as bad mouthing the other parent directly to the child.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a little more subtly about complaining things like, I'll just use, my mother, basically, my who would say, I'm not going to give you the keys to the house because your father's coming back into the house and stealing stuff from the house. So that's victim state,
Yeah.
right? That's not, she's not directly, that's her fear. So she's projecting the fear. So she would just say that to me from a rules. What does that mean? My father's a bad person. It puts some sort of block, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
another layer down. Or it can be, oh, you don't get to have new shoes this month because your father didn't give us the money to be able to buy new shoes, right? Even something like that. That's even a little more subtle as far as the words. There's other things that go to this that kids feel that it's not okay to love their other parent. And those are things like the kid comes home happy from the other parent's house
Mm-hmm.
and wants to just be happy, and that hurts the ego of the parent that they just came home to. And so the parent kind of gives them the cold shoulder or does a little mopiness and is just a little bit of a silent treatment. That shows to the child that it's not okay to enjoy themselves in the other house. It's not okay. So that's another way. So there's lots of ways that end up, or it's, oh, I'm not feeling, I need your help. It's engaging and actually placing emotions on your child so that your child ends up feeling responsible for you,
Mm-hmm.
and turning it around and almost acting in the role of adult, and you as the parent are the child that the child needs to take care of. If that makes sense, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen it. Now,
So
how
those
can
are
we?
all those, yeah.
Well, how can
Those,
they?
all those different examples that I talked about are all the ways that end up having the children feel that they're not allowed
Yeah.
to love
The
one
other
or the other
parent.
parent.
Yeah.
And so, one last thought, and then sorry, is when that happens, and this is the subconscious, when that happens, what's occurring is because children are part mother and part father, you are telling their child it's not okay to love a half of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so you're imprinting in their DNA half of them is not okay. And that is the bigger picture when we're raising kids, is to, we want them to love themselves. And that means all of them, and that means the other parent.
And I hear that so often that when we do that to the kids, we're telling them half of them is no good. And I really hope that parents, father and mothers out there hear that, because they really need to understand that they're hurting their kids, as subtle as it may be. Is still getting deep down into that child, and that child is taking that on and saying, well, wait a minute, if my dad's a bum, then I'm going to be like a bum. Or when a mom might say, you're just like your daddy, and that simple statement is not bad, but what have you said about the daddy in front of that child that's been negative, that he or she is going to look at and say, well, wow, if he's this and he's that and I'm just like him, well, I guess I'm just like him, and
And the tone of voice, Mike, that you just used when delivering that is so important. You're just like, right? That might be in a
yeah,
rage of frustration from a
yeah,
mom talking to the child, but it's the tone
yeah,
that comes off again to the child.
yeah. Because I can tell people it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. That's very important because it's all right. I mean, not all right, but it's one thing to say it. But if you really put some emphasis on it, some guts behind it, and some feeling behind it, it's going to really dig in because, in my estimation, I think as human beings, we gravitate to negativity a lot better than we gravitate to positivity. So we'll take that negativity and just eat it all up. That's just like a big, for me, lemon cake with some glass of milk. I'm going to eat that up, or peach cobbler. I'm having a ball with this, eat it up. So we got to be conscious of that. We've got to be very conscious. And when we're going through a divorce, we have to understand that even if the child is not in a room, if you're having a discussion with somebody else about the divorce or about that other parent, that is still you because you really don't know what that child is hearing or not hearing.
That's right. I'll give you just one example of, I shared a little bit about my mother. Let me give you a little example of how my father handled the situation,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably where some of my modeling and my own co-parenting with my children came from. So I would go to my father as a child and or middle school and then teenagers and say, oh, I need to come live with you. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this. And his answer was, honey, your mother loves you very deeply. That's something that you need to work out with your mother. Do not come here and talk to me about anything that you have with your mother. You will have to go handle that situation with your mother.
Wow.
And just, yes. And by the way, my father was a family law attorney.
Oh, well.
But, um, and my mother a school teacher from background. So if you have the stereotypes of where this comes. So what did that do for me as a foundation? What that gave me is two different models of how to handle working with your children when there
Mm-hmm.
is disagreement and when the child is frustrated, and how you might talk about those, how you don't escalate, how you kind of tamper it down and direct in the right way to have the person directly deal with where their concerns are. And it did not increase the conflict. He might have not known that there was conflict going on between he and my mother, but he refused to address it with me. And that was a fabulous model that his house always felt peaceful. Always.
Mm-hmm.
It was always just calm and peace and sort of a sanctuary.
Yeah. So now, how can we as parents really help our children handle a divorce and navigate through it?
Great. So that, it goes a little bit back to what I had said about healthy, the conflict becomes on how healthy the adult individuals of the parents are.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very first things that I think is very, very important is when you're thinking about divorce and you're a parent, um, there's an intimate relationship communication that is built over time with this partner that you once loved that now has gotten to a you may still love them, there just is a problem, and you're uncoupling, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
partnership is uncoupling. The thing that I think parents, when they uncouple, don't do, they think, oh, I'm no longer in an intimate relationship. That's true. However, there's this built-in DNA of what you had as this intimate partner communication dance, that years down the line you would see your partner down the street and watch their body language, you would know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very subtle. And so in a divorce, parents don't break that. So they stay in that body language and tone and word intimate partner communication instead of shifting and thinking about their co-parenting relationship more like a business partnership,
Mm-hmm.
in that your value and is your stock is the children. So you might not agree how the details of the parenting for what should be done day to day for the kids at their particular age. But I'm quite sure that all parents, no matter where, have the desire that their children are healthy, happy, emotionally stable, and emotionally sound adults at 30. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and independent and thriving. All parents probably want that for their children, right?
Right. Right.
So if you call the business partner mission that, and know that you're actually on the same mission, and you both have 50-50 interests that can't be sold or bought or purchased,
Mm-hmm.
and you think of it this way, then it becomes easier as parents to start navigating through. You may be very friendly, and that's fine, but you think about your workplace, whether you are, an employee of a company and that's been your experience, and you have peers. You might not like all your peers, but you're still working with them.
Mm-hmm.
So you figure out how to deal with them within, so you can still thrive in your company, in your
Mm-hmm.
work environment. Well, that's the same here. You may not really like any longer your business partner, but you got to figure out and know that it can't be sold. So that mindset, I think, is the most useful and most helpful for parents, if they can just shift and understand to not read in so much to all that intimate partner dance that they had, because that's the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get enmeshed and the conflict starts. And if we can kind of put on more of a business hat, where in the business world we have sort of naturally defined boundaries for ourselves. Like, we get an email on a Saturday, but we work 9 to 5. We're not going to respond to that. And we don't get emotional. It's sort of an easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
In this co parenting battle, sometimes we get really emotional because our boundaries have been violated, because we get a text or an email in the middle of the night. Well, you know what? If we think of it in a business relationship, we have control to not respond and to not get emotional about it. We control our boundaries. We don't have to get and start getting to the other person and talking to them about how they're violating our boundaries. It's a waste of our time.
Yeah.
Define our boundaries.
And that's very important. And I really like the analogy that you're using, because I always say a marriage is like a business anyway. So when you're divorcing, you're just taking, half of the assets, and one half's going that way, and one and a half assets is going that way. But you still have stock in the other company, in the sense of you have a children that's involved. So you have shares that you have to work with, and you wanted to see it to grow. You wanted to see it strive. You wanted to bring some equity, in a sense. So it's a great way to look at it and say, I want the best out of that stock that came out of that partnership. And I really hope and wish that a lot of parents would look at that way, because I've experienced it where my wife's, former spouse was like, well, you can't come pick her up and you can't do this. And I said, first of all, if she ever needs me, I will be there for her. Now, instead of that parent saying, that's great, I know my daughter is in a great hands and a man is going to take care of her, he was offended and
Yes.
didn't like the idea. And I've been it on the other side. My former wife was the same way. But I don't want her around here, and I don't want her doing this and that and the other. It's like, wait a minute. Now, she's being a good parent to her. What's the problem? It's you want your child to be happy. At least that's what you say. You say you love that child to death. That is nothing in this world I wouldn't do for that child. But you still have those well, I don't want him, or I don't want her, or this and that. It's not hurting the child, and that's a benefit. That's an added person that's going to help take care of your child. What's the problem?
Mike, that's great. I have in one of my group coaching programs that I have a slide that I created that actually mirrors what you just described a little differently. So the couple in a divorce is uncoupling. The family is never not going to be the family. And in the
Mm-hmm.
eyes of the child has one family. And so if people can visualize a tree, where the roots of the tree are when the child was born, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the two parents together, and the child to grow strong and to flourish like you just said, and to have the buds and the extra ling and all the extra wings. That's the new support system, and that's the new everything. But if you try to sever that tree in half all the way down, no way. You've taken half the roots out of your child.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where they're going to be. You're going to have separated and split them, literally. You have created a split in them that at some point in their life they will have to work through and
Mm-hmm.
heal. And so that's that idea of the business partnership where you created this roots, you've grown up through this trunk, and now this tree family unit is going to keep going. And it's up to us as parents to continue to see that the child always only has one family that gets the benefit of adding to and flourishing to see them grow and thrive as adults.
Yeah. Well, Janet, unfortunately, that is our time for today. I know you and I both can sit here and talk about this topic for hours because it's
Hours.
something very close to you and I both. You've experienced it,
Yes.
I have experienced it, and I've experienced it on a very negative uh, podium and very positive podium. So I understand it, and I've seen the effect of the negative on one of my kids. And so it's really personal to me as it is to you. So I really thank you for coming on the show, sharing your expertise and how we as parents can do a better job when we're going through divorce or gone through a divorce or about to go through a divorce. But
Well,
before
thank
we
you,
get
Mike,
to
so
that,
much.
you're welcome. How can the audience get in touch with you?
So my company is jpcoachingandconsulting.com. I think the best way, since it's a little bit of a long name, is I can be found on Instagram at jpcoachingandconsulting.com. And there's a LinkedIn tree that will guide you to my website, my other Facebook and private Facebook group, and all those other things.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you. And I really hope we have a lot of people that need you definitely get in contact with you because I really want to see more happy kids growing up to be happy adults. And even though they come from a divorcing family, and we see that there's a lot of divorce. So I want to make sure that they have all the resources that they need so they can get and be the happiest person that they can be. You know, that's really it. So I really thank you for what you do. And I thank you for coming on the show and providing that great information.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. And I know we are very both serving exactly the same support and population. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be our show for today. But I really want to thank Janet Price for coming on here and talking about her experience of going through divorce and her experience of co-parenting and co-parenting on her own after she's gone through a divorce. It's really important that we as parents really do the best that we can for our kids in every way, shape, and form. And sometimes that means taking our own feelings out of it and really suppressing what we feel, or to talk about that with somebody else. Don't talk about it when your child's in a room, or your child, most importantly, even in the house, because you don't know what they're hearing when they're in the house. So you got your time. Let's talk about it once the child is away and cannot hear any negativity about the other parents, and they can grow up loving their parents and making their own decision about who that parent is. So, if you have not subscribed to The Father Show with Mike Thompson on our YouTube channel, I ask that you would go to our YouTube channel, hit that subscription button, and while you're there, hit that notification bell. And really, tell somebody else about The Father Show. We're here for not just the men, mainly for the men, but we also like women to watch the show, because you can learn what we're going through, and also maybe what your son may be going through as well. So really, do not hold this. Tell somebody else. And if you ever need to get in touch with us, let us know. Hit us up at thefathershow@gmail.com. And men, if you are in need of resources, go to thefathershowwithmikethompson.com. Click on resources, and there you will find state and national resources that can assist you with whatever you may need. So until we see you next week, God bless you all. I thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you next week.